I invite you to sit back and enjoy tonight's program.
I would like to welcome our viewers on behalf of the University of Virginia's College at Wise and the Black History Month Committee to our 25th anniversary of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Remembrance Program. I don't need to remind everyone that 2020 was a different kind of year. When the committee started planning how we would celebrate the 25th year of this event, we never expected to still be under the restrictions and threat of COVID-19 a year later. We were determined to not let the virus win and take our joy. We would miss the camaraderie of the community dinner and the reverence of the march through the streets of Wise, but we were determined that we would let the event go on even if it meant celebrating virtually. As we found ways to face the challenges, we discovered things that matter. 25 years ago, the founder of the program, Mary Eubanks, had a dream to commemorate the life and legacy of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with a candlelight march and a service. We were determined to keep the tradition alive. The program began humbly with a march from Crockett Hall to the courthouse lawn with cookies and ciders as refreshments. It has grown to a catered community dinner at the Wise Baptist Church, to the march through the main streets of Wise, and to a service at the First Church of God. During tonight's presentation, you will see reflections of 25 years of the things that matter, a college and community that has come together to make this event happen each year. Please enjoy a brief pictorial of the performers and featured speakers sharing their time and thoughts, their insight, hope, wisdom, and courage to remembering the struggle of the civil rights movement. Tonight you will hear from founder Mary Eubanks, speaker Justin Preston, reciting Reverend King's I Have a Dream speech, and our featured speaker, Bishop W. Darren Moore from the AME Zion Church. Currently, Bishop Moore resides in Maryland, serves as the presiding bishop of the Mid-Atlantic Episcopal District, including Allegheny, East Tennessee, Virginia, Ohio, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Virginia, Barbados, Guyana, Suriname, and St. Vincent conferences.
On behalf of the University of Virginia's College at Wise, I welcome you to our community's annual remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King's life and legacy. Thank you to all the people who've made this virtual event possible. Today's speakers and presenters are Mary Eubanks, the founder of this program and the former Director of Housing and Residence Life here at the college. Reverend Justin Preston of Robinson Memorial AME Zion Church, and keynote speaker Bishop W. Darren Moore of the AME Zion Church, a lifelong spiritual leader who has served all over the country and world. Thank you for joining us, and it is a pleasure to have you here for today's program. Thank you to the UVA-Wise Black History Committee, who every year devotes significant time and energy to ensure that our community properly honors the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Thank you to the Office of Compliance and Inclusion and organizers of the Community Read in honor of both Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Black History Month. UVA-Wise will disseminate 500 copies of the book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community by Martin Luther King Jr. Then, on January 25th, UVA and UVA-Wise will host a panel discussion highlighting the continued relevance of the teachings and insights of these powerful writings from Martin Luther King. Our very own retiree, Reverend Sandra Jones, will participate in the panel discussion. Additionally, the UVA-Wise Office of Compliance and Inclusion will partner with the Lonesome Pine Regional Library System to distribute 176 books to the community at 4 different library locations in Wise County. These include the Wise County Public Library in Wise, Virginia, the C. Bascom Slemp Memorial Library in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, the Coburn Community Library in Coburn, Virginia, and the J. Fred Matthews Library in St. Paul, Virginia. Support for this community read for UVA-Wise is provided by Don Green and the Napoleon Hill Foundation, the UVA-Wise Foundation, and the UVA-Wise Office of Compliance and Inclusion. It's so wonderful to see our community come together year after year to honor Dr. King. I'm sorry that this year we could not break bread together and process together through the town of Wise. However, in the spirit of today's theme, I believe what matters most is that we keep our eyes, our hearts, and our actions focused on what matters most. And one thing that matters, and a great point of pride for our community, is that today we mark the 25th anniversary of this commemoration. The Martin Luther King Jr. program has been vibrant and growing for the past 25 years. And let it be another 25 years, 100 years, and more that we reaffirm our commitment to the shared values of community, unity, and justice. Thank you.
First, let me thank the committee for inviting me to be a part of the 25th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative March. I think back and I'm like, when I left Clinch Valley or University of Virginia at Wise, I thought, oh, they're never going to keep it going. It'll die once I leave. But you've proven me wrong. 25 years. 25 years ago, I was sitting in my office and trying to think of an idea for this Black or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. program. And I said, commemorative march. I think that'll work. Walk from the campus to the courthouse, and that'll be all fine. Well, in order to have a march, we had to have a parade permit. Well, I sent the paperwork in. 2 days before the activity, I called to ask when could I come pick it up, and no one knew what I was talking about. I'm like, I sent a parade permit, and you were supposed to sign off so we could have the march. They said we didn't receive it. I said, okay, that's fine. I said, I'll drive it there because I almost got let my mind run away with me and wanted to give up. And then I said, what? Dr. King had more adversity during the time when he was marching than a parade permit. So car, went to every office and I got it. We marched from Smitty Hall, which is no longer there, to downtown in the cold, the wind, and the rain, walking through puddles of water to get to the courthouse. And mind you, we were supposed to be able to go in the courthouse for the program. Well, the person that was supposed to come unlock the door so we could get inside did not show up. Again, another thing that could have made us stop. But we're like, we made this march, we've made this walk. We'll just do it outside in the snow, the rain, and the wind. The food service brought down the hot chocolate and apple cider, and the program went on. So I just want to say, y'all keep up, keep going. Don't let it die. We had adversities about getting the parade permit. Yours is the coronavirus and not being able to do the real march, but everything being done virtually. And this day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, is not a day off from work or out of school. It's a day where we should be doing community service activities, working in a soup kitchen, helping out in the nursing homes, reading to students, to a class of students, um, or just doing something that's for the community and not something that you're sitting down for the whole day. You could also run errands for the elderly. So that's a brief history of how the march got started. Um, Thank you to the University of Virginia College at Wise for remembering me and asking me to be a part of the 25th annual program. Keep the dream alive.
Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadows we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope for all millions of Negro slaves. 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty and in exile in his own land. So we come here today to dramatize this shameful condition. I say unto you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day, down on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day down in Mississippi, a state sweltering with heat of oppression will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, even with its vicious racists, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and every mountain will be made low, and the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed so that all the flesh may see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that one day we will be free. And this will be the day we will be able to sing with a new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must be true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty Rockies of Colorado. From every hill and molehill down in Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city. And we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Thank you.
To Chancellor Donna Henry, to Deborah Vanover, the program chair, and to Reverend Sandra Jones, who serves as the pastor of Williams Chapel AME Zion Church in Big Stone Gap, and who recommended me to the planning committee for this special occasion. I want to thank you, each of you, for your gracious invitation. And I also want to greet the entire community of University of Virginia Wise. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this very important event. As a bishop in the AME Zion Church, I am honored to be a part of a denomination that was founded in 1796 by a group of Blacks that included some formerly enslaved persons. In our early years, our church was widely known as the Freedom Church, because our leaders were fervently committed to working to end slavery and towards justice and equality. To this day, we continue to share the liberating gospel of Jesus Christ and to remain committed to our struggle for justice as we also work towards ending mass incarceration, voter suppression, economic transformation, criminal justice reform, and educational opportunities for all people. Such great leaders as Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and Sojourner Truth were members of the AME Zion Church. And when a young Baptist preacher, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., decided to find a wife, he found and married Coretta Scott, who was a member of the AME Zion Church. The year 2020 proved to be the most challenging year in most of our lifetimes. We faced a tridemic, a health pandemic, a financial crisis, and social unrest. And while we are relieved to have 2020 in the rearview mirror, the fact is that we continue to deal with some of the lingering issues that were so dramatically revealed last year. The author of Ecclesiastes said that there's nothing new under the sun, and that is so true. We've had health pandemics throughout human history. Financial uncertainty is something we can be certain of. And social unrest is woven into the fabric of American society. As Jim Wallace of Sojourners has said, that racism is America's original sin. However, what we learned in 2020 was that it's easy to take our comfort for granted and become lulled into complacency regarding the issues some of our sisters and brothers are facing on a daily basis. So I want to commend UVA Wise on your celebration and commemoration of the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, not just as another day off, another simple holiday, but rather as a day on, a day not just for rest, but a day for reflection, recommitment, education, and action. It's a day to build upon our understanding of the very real pain of our past and how much it continues in our communities to this very day. It is a day to examine our own personal commitment to the values of justice and equality that Martin Luther King Jr. preached and lived. During a speech at Purdue University in Indiana in 1958, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. outlined some fundamental principles on how we are to evaluate and measure our lives. His topic that day was the three dimensions of a complete life. The three dimensions of a complete life. And using the text in Revelation as his core, he talked about measuring life in three ways: the length of life, the width of life, and the height of life. In other words, reaching forward, reaching outward, and reaching upward. At the conclusion of his speech, Dr. King offered a prayer that I would like to use at the beginning of my message today. Here's the prayer. Help us to discover ourselves, to discover our neighbors, and to discover thee, O God, and to make all three an integral part of our lives. Amen. The length of life. For King, the length of life was the outward push that each of us makes to become the very best possible self. It is the drive that refuses to accept mediocrity as the standard for our lives. It is the desire for educational excellence and vocational success. It is the commitment to pursue our purpose with passion, refusing to allow obstacles, problems, naysayers, and difficulties to detour us from our goals. You will discover that some very talented people fail to find their purpose in life, not because they're not smart, not because they're not resourceful, but because they're not focused. They will allow distractions and discouragement to pull them off course. In life, I've learned that you'll find some people who are coasters, some people who are conformers, and others who are committed. The coasters are those who just drift through life with no ambition, no master plan, no real purpose, no dream that pulls them to their better selves. They simply coast through life. Like putting the car in neutral, the problem is that if you're coasting, the only direction you can go is downhill. Nothing ever coasts in an upward direction or to a higher level. Regardless of your age, your financial situation, or your education, please keep reaching forward, keep dreaming, keep pressing. When you stop dreaming, you start dying. If you have no goals, you have no growth. You were designed by God for great things. So press your way forward towards your divine destiny. Never be a coaster. But then there are conformers. Conformers are those who allow everybody around them to shape their lives. If folks are going in a direction, they just follow the crowd. They rarely are bold enough and brave enough to step aside to discover who they really are as individuals, to think for themselves, even if it's not always popular. Please never forget that the Bible says that you, my sisters and brothers, are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are, in fact, God's masterpiece. God made you to be you, not a cheap carbon copy of somebody else. There are 7.8 billion people in the world, but there is only one you. Unless you're an identical twin, nobody has your DNA. No one has your fingerprint or your footprint. No one has exactly what makes you who you are. So don't spend your life trying to be a second-rate imitation of somebody else when you can be a first-class you, a 1 in 7 billion you. But then there are those who are committed to achieve their best in life. They celebrate their wonderful uniqueness, understanding that although they are not perfect, they are who God made them to be, and they press towards being a better version of themselves every day. If a bird became discouraged because it couldn't swim, and a squirrel became depressed because it couldn't fly, and a fish became discouraged because it couldn't climb trees, each would spend their lives being miserable and failing to fulfill their destiny by doing what they could do to the best of their ability. The bird can soar into the sky. The squirrel can climb to the highest treetops, and the fish can swim in the deep waters. You have a gift. You are wired in a unique way. So be who God has made you to be. A poem that Martin Luther King Jr. often would quote says, "If you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a scrub in the valley, but be the best little scrub by the side of the rill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, then be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. It is not by size that you win or you fail. Be the best at whatever you are." The length of life or reaching forward. But then there's the breadth of life or the width of life, and that has to do with how we reach out to others, recognizing that no man is an island, that each of us are inextricably connected one to the other. There's no such thing as living a Lone Ranger experience. Besides, even the Lone Ranger needed Tonto. It's so important to remember in this contemporary culture that's dominated by iPhones and iPads and iWatches that we don't just need to be focused on what I want and I feel and what I must have. Life is so much more than being only about me, myself, and I. We don't wear a mask while in public spaces just so we can protect ourselves. We wear masks because we care enough about others that we don't want to pass along a virus that could kill someone or make them very sick. It's worth our temporary inconveniences, and yes, even our individual rights to show concern for others and set good examples. Although we have been forced to practice social distancing, we must earnestly guard against social isolation. We are not to live I-centered lives. We are people created to live in a beloved community. This term was first coined by the theologian Josiah Royce and then popularized by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In fact, it was a continuing theme through much of his preaching, teaching, and speaking throughout his life. In the beloved community, every person is valued as possessing imago Dei, the image of God. This requires each of us to not only verbalize the virtues of human dignity, equality, and justice, but to ourselves personally become invested in achieving those goals, using our unique gifts, engaging our skills, raising our voices, and sharing our resources to that end. A story is told about a man who dreamed that he had died, and an angel escorted him first down to hell. There he saw a long banquet table with a vast array of food spread out, delicious looking food. However, the people who were sitting around the table were all thin and gaunt and hungry looking. The man asked the angel, how can they be so hungry with all this food available on the table? And the angel responded, in this place, everyone is selfish. Look at their hands. And then the man realized that each person had hands shaped like forks, but they were 4 feet long, so that when each person scooped up food and tried to bring it to their mouths, it was too long to fit, and the food fell to the floor. The angel then took the man to heaven, where he saw the same table with a feast of food that looked just like the one in hell, spread out before the people. And the people, in fact, did have the same 4 feet long forks for hands. But this time the behavior was completely different, because rather than scooping up the food to try to feed themselves, each one scooped up food and reached across the table and fed the person on the other side of the table. And as they fed them, those on the other side fed them back. Imagine how different our world would be, how different our nation would be, how different our communities would be if we all would be willing to reach out and help others realize their own God-given value. I cannot be satisfied when me, myself, and I am satisfied only when my family and my church and my community and my college and my state and my country have all of the resources. I must be concerned about the least of these, because Jesus reminded us that how we treat the least of these, the ones who are strangers, the ones who are immigrants, the ones who don't fit into our niche, the ones that we may not feel comfortable with, the ones who look a little different, the ones who have a different skin complexion, the ones who speak a different language or have a different accent. Jesus says we are going to be judged on how we treat those that are considered the least of these. As members of the beloved community, we could never be satisfied simply saying, I'm not a racist. We would, in fact, put into practice the principles of Ibram Kendi, the author of the powerful book of the title, How to Become an Anti-Racist, where he argues that saying I'm not a racist is not enough, but that we must actively engage in anti-racist behavior, calling out issues and people and sayings and jokes and employment practices and buying and selling practices and laws and other educational policies that have racist implications. If we truly understood Martin Luther King's vision of the beloved community, we would do more than have friends of different racial, ethnic, and economic backgrounds. We would educate ourselves on the issues and then advocate and vote for policies and political leaders who take concrete actions to dismantle systemic racism, sexism, and classism. If we are going to honor Dr. King's memory, his life and his legacy, we cannot sit idly by where protests are going on in other places in this country and not become concerned and engage in whatever way works for us. Not everybody will be able to protest out on the street, but everybody can vote. Everybody can write their congressperson, their senator. Everybody can lobby their mayor and city council person. Everybody can speak up at Board of Education meetings. Everybody can volunteer to help communities that are hurting and that are marginalized. Mahalia Jackson sung a song that should become one of our theme songs in life. Mahalia Jackson said, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can help somebody with a word or song, if I can keep somebody from doing wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. The length of life is how we reach forward. The width of life is how we reach out to one another. But finally, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about the height of life, he was referring to that upward reach towards God, who is the source of our strength and our purpose. For King, as it must be for us, faith cannot simply be treated as a spare tire that we pull out only in the case of an emergency. Our faith must be central to shaping our lives and everything we are and everything that we do. January 27th, 1956 is a significant date in the life and ministry of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, after having been raised as a preacher's son, after having gone to seminary and graduating at the top of his class, after having come as a young man to pastor a leading church in Montgomery, Alabama, Martin Luther King realized that his faith was more words than it was real, that it was more about being a part of the church than having it in his heart, that it was more his daddy and his mama's religion than it was his own personal faith. And so it was on that night, around midnight on January 27th, 1956, that his faith became real for him. He had a transforming personal spiritual experience that became the center of his heart and life for the rest of his time as a leader of the civil rights movement. It was during those early days of the Montgomery bus boycott, and Dr. King was regularly receiving threatening phone calls at his home. His life was in danger. On this particular night, one such call triggered for King a spiritual crisis. This is how Dr. King describes that fateful night in his autobiography. The telephone started ringing and I picked it up. On the other end was an ugly voice. That voice said to me, in using the N-word, "We are tired of you and your mess now. And if you aren't out of this town in 3 days, we're going to blow your brains out and blow up your house with your family in it." Dr. King goes on to tell how he prayed to God at that very moment, filled with fear and weakness, thinking not only about his own life being at risk, but that of his wife and young daughter who were asleep upstairs. Dr. King says, as he continues to tell the story, "I bowed my head down over that cup of coffee. I will never forget it. And oh yes, I prayed. I prayed a prayer out loud that night. I said, Lord, I'm down here trying to do what's right. I think I'm right. I think the cause that we represent is right. But Lord, I must confess that I'm weak now. I'm faltering. I'm losing my courage, and I can't let the people see me like this, because if they see me weak and losing my courage, they will begin to get weak too. What followed was a transforming spiritual experience in which God provided the assurance necessary for Dr. King to go on and endure the opposition and even violent resistance that he encountered, not only in Montgomery, but continuing over the next 12 years until his assassination in 1968. Dr. King says, and it seemed at that very moment that I could hear an inner voice saying to me, Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness, stand up for justice, stand up for truth. And lo, I will be with you even until the end of the earth. And I'll tell you, I've seen the lightning flashing. I've heard the thunder roll. I've felt sin breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus telling me to still fight on, because he promised never to leave me alone. It was at that moment that Martin Luther King reached up through the height of life, and he felt grasped by the power of God. He reached up and connected with the source of ultimate power. And it was that source of power that kept King through the rest of his life, through the many dark days and difficult times. It reminds me of an event when I was a young person growing up in New York. In July 1977, New York City had a blackout due to a lightning strike hitting a power station. It caused the entire city to be in darkness for almost 6 hours that night. But one of the most fascinating sights was that the torch of the Statue of Liberty kept shining the entire time. What the public came to learn later was the Statue of Liberty doesn't get its electrical power from New York City. Its source of power comes from the state of New Jersey. So even when all of New York City lost its darkness, all of New York City lost its power, all of New York City was in darkness, the Statue of Liberty could continue to let her light shine. Reach, my sisters and brothers, forward to be the best that you can be. Reach, my sisters and brothers, outward to be connected to the beloved community. And reach, my sisters and brothers, upward to the power that only God can give. That source of power that was Sojourner Truth's message of equality, Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, Frederick Douglass's North Star, Harriet Tubman's Engine of Deliverance, Rosa Parks' courage, Martin Luther King's dream sender, Nelson Mandela's prison door opener, my grandmother's joy in the time of sorrow, my grandfather's rock of ages, my mother's doctor in the sick room, my father's friend to the friendless, and God who is my all and all. Reach forward, reach outward, and reach upward. May God bless you. Be encouraged and live life on purpose, with purpose, empowered by God's purpose throughout 2021 and beyond. Thank you.
And I just want to be there in love and in justice and in truth and in commitment to others so that we can make of this old world a new world. When this life is over, oh, I'll fly away to a land where joy shall never, oh, I'll
Teach the children well. Keep the message. Keep the light burning.
The Office of Compliance and Inclusion, the Napoleon Hill Foundation, and the University of Virginia's Wise Foundation are sponsoring a community read to celebrate Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Remembrance Day. For more information on how to obtain your copy of Reverend King's book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, contact Tabitha Smith, Director of the Office of Compliance and Inclusion at the University of Virginia's College at Wise, or the Lonesome Pine Regional Library. A panel discussion will be held on January 25th at 6 p.m. We must never forget our history, the atrocities and injustice of the past, and do our best to prevent them from repeating. We all have a personal list of things that matter, but as part of mankind, we should never forget that fundamentally we all share the same basic desires: freedom, respect, acceptance, and love. We must never forget that Dr. King gave his life for things that matter. We would like to thank you for taking time from your busy day to join our program. Until next year, wishing you the best.